You're listening to Conferences Online Allergy, special Wednesday evening edition, brought to you by the American College of Allergy, Asthma, and Immunology. I'm Dr. Jay Portnoy, Chief of Allergy at Children's Mercy Hospitals and Clinics in Kansas City, Missouri, and I'll be your host this evening. First up, we're going to talk about ocular allergy with Dr. Leonard Billery. At 8 o'clock, we're going to be joined by Dr. Dana Wallace, who's the current Vice President of the American College of Allergy, Asthma, and Immunology, and she was going to update us on what's new on the web.
And finally, at 9 o'clock, we'll speak with Kevin Kennedy about environmental assessment and remediation. So sit back and enjoy yourself on Conferences Online Allergy, special Wednesday evening edition. First up, we're pleased to be joined by Dr. Leonard Billery. Dr. Billery is a professor in the Department of Medicine at UMDNJ, New Jersey Medical School. He's also associate professor at the Institute of Ophthalmology and Visual Science at the New Jersey Medical School and co-director of the Immuno-Ophthalmology Service at the medical school. Dr. Billery is an expert in ophthalmology and allergy. Welcome to Conferences Online Allergy Special Wednesday evening edition, Dr. Billery.
Of Cola Online, I guess it's by the fireside chat for Wednesday evenings that we're going to try putting together. And congratulations, Jay Portnoy, for championing this concept that I think has great potential for the subspecialty of allergy immunology, and it's wonderful to have the college take the leadership role. This evening I've been given the duty or the pleasure of actually taking what I think will be an interesting idea of going via the internet and perhaps taking in the future individuals, points who would like to have interesting cases or topics reviewed. One of the areas that I'm going to review tonight is just as a point to walk away as a common question in the treatment of allergy and that we get from our patients and that we get a variety of components along that, and that is the issue of ocular allergy treatments. Specifically, can you use contact lenses, and what do contact lenses do with patients with ocular allergy? Again, I thank Jay for championing this concept. I'd like to utilize this time, perhaps as we grow and develop, is to answer clinical treatments or specific issues in clinical practice. The scenario would be for anything, whether it becomes a broken joint or anything like that. We use cold compresses. Contact lenses have an interesting process, and they have associated with them a variety of different types of lenses with different concentrations. So when you look at the impact of these primary treatments, avoidance, you can get simple avoidance, 30% symptom improvement in clinical studies. Cold compresses, by denervation of the nerve C fiber stimulation, they will reduce superficial vasodilatation and mild moderate symptoms. And preservative-free tears of lubrication in that regards, I always remind people, refrigerated, it actually adds cold compresses to the eye locally. Interesting enough, contact lenses has not been in the armamentarium or has been a question of how to use them or to use them at all in allergy treatment. Contact lenses are themselves a bandage or provide a barrier effect. They decrease the impact of pollen on the cornea itself and the deposition, but then it really doesn't change much when you talk about allergen concentration, because it either becomes embedded in the contact lens, or it actually ruptures and shatters and delivers smaller particles down of the allergens. But there are clear studies, which I'm going to show you for discussion, that actually you can get up to 67% improvement with the use of contact lenses. Now be careful, it depends what type. When we look at contact lens and allergy in general, there's an article, an old article in Contact Lens Journal, that atrophy was noted to be increased in symptoms while people were wearing their contact lenses during the season, meaning people had more allergic symptoms, more allergic conjunctivitis, tearing processes if they were wearing their contact lenses during the season, and it was about 5 times their baseline. It was interesting to note that soft contact lenses in atopics were less comfortable than those in non-atopics, meaning if individuals who are already allergic have a process of inflammation. By putting a contact lens in, these soft contact lenses in the mid-1990s, and we've come a long way since then, they actually were less comfortable. People actually developed dry eyes because perhaps they were taking other medications. Not totally clear about that because the studies did not provide that data. Although soft contact lenses are more comfortable than the rigid, 8% of individuals discontinued contact lens use during the allergy season. They really felt them uncomfortable. They got dryness. Again, not clear if it was due to taking Benadryl, oral antihistamines, which will cause more dryness in the eye. And once you have a contact lens on a lower aqueous float, a layer of fluid on the lens, the contact lens will actually become stickier and people get more uncomfortable. It's the same thing while people ski. You'll notice skiers actually, if they don't wear their goggles and they wear contact lenses, they will pop out their lens because they will evaporate their tear fluid so fast that they have nothing for the contact lens to float on. It then dries up and literally buckles and falls out. In the other study in the mid-1990s, it was a very interesting development. And what they did was that they did a 3-year prospective study in 12 practices in between eye care providers with almost 338 individuals. You got different types of contacts. You have conventional daily wearers. You have those who have frequent replacement who actually disposable, or like 2-week versus a 1 out of every 3 months. You have different types of disposable units. And then you have the daily disposable. Now these are very important because it's interesting to note the present practice probably has evolved to much more common use of daily disposable, but it's not cheap. When you take a look at the daily disposable individuals versus those that were conventionally wearing them on a daily basis, taking them out, putting them in, whatever, there was clearly a better improvement in daily disposables who were asymptomatic. They had fewer symptoms of redness, cloudy vision, grittiness in their eye. Now, let me also talk about grittiness as a symptom. Grittiness usually is a symptom of tear film dysfunction. When you think about that, it's actually due to one of 3 things: a decreased aqueous layer in the tear film, a decreased mucin layer, or a decreased protein layer. There's one of 3 defects. So people who have clearly dry eye, keratoconjunctivitis, etc., have no aqueous. They may have mucin, but they have no aqueous at all. And that leads to xerophthalmia. That's the most common thing that we know about being dry eye syndrome. But people can walk around with allergies and dry eye syndrome. Tear film dysfunction, specifically, as it's more properly called, is because they're producing too much aqueous because they don't have enough mucin, or they don't have enough protein in that tear fluid. And that can actually be part of routine allergy. Metalloproteinases do the same thing. So in these patients, there are fewer lens deposits. They got complications less often. They will get some tarsal abnormalities that are decreased, and there are some issues of unscheduled visits. When you talk about handling the lenses, really holding them, the quote-unquote conventional daily wear really were more proficient in how they use them, and they didn't feel like the daily disposable really didn't feel as comfortable. They were, the throwaways. And again, remember, this is 1996, mid-1990s. We're 10 years from that. The studies, we don't have much studies from that, but it has been a long time. But at that time, people were not comfortable. Now people are using it much more frequently. When you look at the daily disposable versus a frequent replacement, again, the same thing occurred as the conventional daily wear, where daily disposable really won. It reported fewer symptoms of foreign body, redness, cloudy, grittiness, lens surface deposits, complications, tarsal abnormality, better subjective vision, comfort, and overall satisfaction. We're clearly seeing in the paper were daily disposable. And that was within the ones that went out of 3 months, but I take every just a 2-week disposable, which you have to clean them every so often, but you can take them out and get rid of them. They still had daily disposable one out. But where did, quote unquote, of the frequent replacement win? Again, something what they call photophobia symptoms, where they actually had some glaring of light at that time. I'm not totally clear what the explanation was. I was not involved in the study, nor the paper reflected it. So if you had to take the comfort level of the daily disposal versus the constant wear, now, quote unquote, the comfort improved clearly in the daily disposable versus where the comfort didn't improve, and the habitual wear where people wore it all the time, clearly the comfort was not as good in that regards. So the contact lens story. Extended wear contact lens should be limited in ocular allergies patients. Yeah, that's the extended wear. That should be a common statement. You shouldn't wear the extended wear. Seasonal allergy patients should avoid contact lenses during seasonal flare-ups. That is a common statement that we use nowadays. And working on what we will see, hopefully in the near future, practice parameters, some of this may be creeping into that. Contact lenses should be cleaned to minimize the positive buildup. That's very more common sense. Use of daily disposable or daily wear with rigid disinfecting must be part of their regimen. But one can now really start to think about placing in, because there is one study at least, and it's of recent vintage, that daily disposable lenses actually decrease allergic symptoms specifically associated with the eye, because they actually create a barrier. They induce tearing for while you put it on, which is increased lubrication, and they actually have increased or decreased subjective signs or complaints and some signs associated with ocular allergy. The question about the use of topical anti-allergy agents while the lenses are in place, this is true specifically when it comes to vasoconstrictor, the Visine over-the-counters, clearly should not be used with these agents. Steroids should not be used with these agents. The question whether topical antihistamines or the multiple action agents can be used, I have on a quote-unquote off the what will be make a statement this is not what the FDA would recommend, but I normally use it before putting the contact lens in, but sometimes even while the contact lens in, I will have patients utilize it because they are disposing the lens by the end of the day, and they're not having this bandage effect for 2 weeks or 3 months. But what we can say in the patients who have a chronic form, a severe form of conjunctivitis called vernal conjunctivitis, they're contraindicated because they literally do maintain what people would think is that vernal is loaded with eosinophils that are loaded with major basic protein, and major basic protein causes dehiscence of epithelial cells. And if you load a contact lens, which is 80-90% water, in contact with eosinophils and MBP, your lens is going to be loaded with MBP and lead to additional loss of epithelial cells on the cornea. So you really would exacerbate patients with VKC, though this has not been studied in AKC. It may have similar consequences, except for those who need to wear contact lenses, those with AKC and keratoconus. You may have to work around that. And so this really I wanted to bring to the point of, quote unquote, the use of contact lenses in ocular allergy and allergy treatment. One other area that one needs to appreciate is that the chronic use of the old lenses, what we'll call rigid, induced a condition called giant papillary conjunctivitis, and still does to this day. And the best treatment for those patients is, quote, a contact lens holiday. They really have to come off of it. And topical steroids, we can get into that. Some other treatment, as we asked, we can raise for another Wednesday evening for a special fireside chat, so to speak, on the use of topical steroids and where I think allergists should be working their patient up and treating. So for this evening, I really wanted to come around to talking about, quote unquote, acute versus chronic and the use of contact lenses in a day-to-day treatment. Is it wise, unwise? Where would you use it, and where would you not? At this point in time, I'd like to open it up for questions from the audience as a concept that we're trying to launch. And this is, like I say, it's supposed to be an open forum that Jay wanted to really have it open. It's just a few slides, discussion points, and then we can have the audience provide point versus counterpoint. Entertain questions at this time.
Hey, Len, I do have one question for you about the use of contact lenses, and it's a topic that we think of all the time, but we just kind of shy away from because we just don't know the answers. But that is, if they are permeable and medications get into them, why wouldn't it be reasonable to maybe soak them in chromalin solution or an antihistamine and then put them in and have like a sustained release anti-allergic response from the contact lens? Wouldn't that be something that might be worthwhile?
You're raising an excellent point. Like I stated, the FDA originally did not want people using it because they did not know the answer. However, there are studies right now. A major company is studying the use of an over-the-counter topical ocular allergy agent that will be impregnated into a contact lens. It's being studied in an optometrist's office right now. I would have liked to have had allergists involved. However, we couldn't find many allergists who were comfortable in doing that. However, you're absolutely correct. If the product is over-the-counter already approved, there is a company trying to actually expand the use, and I think it's something that allergists should be involved. And there's no reason why you can't have a long release, a constant release type of contact lens in the partial treatment of allergies, specifically allergic rhinoconjunctivitis, which is just really treating the conjunctivitis portion. Any other? I got some more questions.
Yeah, I was kind of curious about. This is Brock. I was kind of curious about allergic patients with blepharitis, and should they wear contacts at all?
Blepharitis is an involvement that's supposed to, when you say just blepharitis, it means just the eyelid. And it could be 1 millimeter from the eye conjunctival border, or it could be 10 millimeters, a centimeter, 2 centimeters away. Blepharal conjunctivitis is where we get the inflammation on the eyelid, which are normally flake from either agents, or it could be an irritant dermatitis causing flaking. It could be a contact dermatitis causing flaking, or it can even be a dermatophytid. It could be something, a superficial fungal infection causing. And in the classic staphylococcal blepharal conjunctivitis that is seen in atopic keratoconjunctivitis, it's a staph, and it's actually, some studies have shown the staph exotoxin, which causes toxic shock, causes a minor toxic shock in the eye with its slight release of an exotoxin on the conjunctival surface. Now, the use of contact lenses in patients with blepharitis specifically is, again, it has to do with hygiene of the eyelid, not the lens itself. The lens itself is not contraindicated, but if you have poor hygiene, you're going to just cause more of an irritation in the eye, of which, if there is a problem with tear film, the lens may become a secondary problem as well. It is rare that the lens becomes infected like with staphylococcal. It is not rare for lenses to become infected from unusual species that people don't wash their lens solutions in a proper, and actually become a culture medium for some very unusual infectious agents, which can lead to corneal scarring. Any other questions?
Yeah, one more. In those studies, when you do these day-to-day things, don't a lot of those people reuse their, try to save a day and clean it out, or is that possible? And
you'll find, I think, especially in this economic times, people try stretching the dollar in a variety of ways. We have people all the time who get a month's supply of contact lenses and don't come back for 2.5 months, meaning they will try to wear for 1.5 days, 2 days. They will not wear them on weekends and wear glasses. They will give themselves a holiday, which is good. But on the other hand, they do try stretching it. There is a problem. It's unknown what they're keeping the solution in and whether they will get infection. There is a slight increase, no, not dramatic, increase of what we'll call infectious conjunctivitis from schmutz, whatever bacteria, actually is typical a streptococcal type of infection from their fingers. They get on the contact lens, they didn't clean well, and they put it in their eye again. So yeah, some people have tried stretching it out. There is an increased complication rate. If they do good washing of hands, they really can be worn more than a single day, but that's not what the FDA recommends, of course.
Of course, the FDA isn't going to recommend much of anything if it hasn't been studied and approved. But wouldn't contact lenses serve as a shield if there's a high pollen count, if there's like a lot of ragweed in the air and you wear contact lenses? Why wouldn't that be a barrier to keep the pollen out of your eyes?
The issue there is that you raise a good point. If it's high pollen count, what happens is that patients who wear the daily disposable do have an improved symptomatology. There is a study by a large company. They have not published it, though I have reviewed their studies, has shown that this one study was true. It also shows that in patients, for example, in urban environments, such as major metropolitan cities, where there's a lot of pollution, which acts as an adjuvant to most allergies, the lens actually becomes a magnet. It sucks in or a large proportion. I have photos, and maybe I should have shown it. I have photos of contact lenses under electron microscopy showing the increased particulate matter that is absorbed to the lens over time. The more they wear it, the more. So it becomes, and it's very pronounced, in fact, over a period of 1 day. So it does have a positive effect, and it clearly does. If the same individual, it was a survey/study, not a scientific one that I would say would be publishable in any of our journals, but it was clear that those individuals who on certain days, certain pollen counts and certain pollution indices were measured, that the days that they wore their contact lenses had almost, like I said, 67%, 2/3 of them had improved symptoms or less intense symptoms than other days which had similar counts. So they do have a beneficial effect, but only the daily disposable. The longer you wear, by the second or third day, you start getting into problems.
Wow.
Question from me?
Well, we usually try to avoid having patients with allergies wear contact lenses at all. We just tell them don't wear them during the allergy season. Are there certain kinds that would be okay? Should we tell them to get the hard lenses or the impermeable ones to wear during those times of year then?
No, actually the harder the lens, the more irritant they have to the eye. And the person who has already ocular allergies already has an underlying inflammatory response, and it would not be wise to use hard or to switch them to hard lenses. They will find them almost intolerable. So in that regards, I highly do not recommend them in that regard. I recommend more of a holiday if they have more problems. In addition, those who have chronic inflammatory or some mild allergic conjunctivitis, the propensity, if they go to hard lens, may have an increase. Well, they do have an increased chance of developing giant papillary conjunctivitis. It's not the giant papillary conjunctivitis with the large papillary reactions, but you will get what we'll call grade 1, which are like little pimples on it, but it just becomes a very irritating process. And again, the treatment is topical steroids and a, quote, contact lens-free holiday.
What about wearing sealed goggles that on your eyes? I mean, some people wear them in occupational settings, but during high allergy season, would it be reasonable to have people get like goggles that would fit securely around the eye to keep the outside stuff away?
I've been trying to get, maybe one day we'll get this study done. I was trying to get these studies in these units, the quote-unquote the pollen units, the DAYS unit and the LANA, where we have these indoor pollen counts, and actually have some patient wear goggles, because then I will be able to measure the impact of the allergen on the nose versus the eye, separated from the direct application of the allergen to the eye. And that study has never been done. In the chamber studies, the day chamber, Atlanta chamber, Vienna chamber, they've always left the eye and routine exposure just like the nose. The answer to you, I would say, is absolutely, would definitely improve it. And I would project it would improve it from 60 to 90%. But there will be a small percentage that no matter, as long as you have nasal inflammation, you'll have ocular inflammation, what we call the nasal ocular reflex, which is an interesting concept. Again, could be a topic, discussion for our future topic of one of these go-to-meetings.
Now, is that reflex due to reflux of the material from the nose back up into the eye, or is that actually due to I don't know, blockage of the lacrimal duct so that material in the eye just fails to drain out?
I think it's a variety, and if you take a percentage, it will be about 90% truly neurological, meaning the inflammation of a nerve inside the nose will actually cause a person to have tears and increased redness. And the perfect example for that would be cut a piece of onion. And even though it's without, you can close your eyes and you'll still tear and you'll still have red eyes. It may not be as red as when you open them. When you get the allicin, which is the quote the sulfhydryl group chemical in the onion or its family, that irritates the direct conjunctival surface, but it directly inflames the nasal surface to do that. Nasal lacrimal reflux going up is been reported. I remember seeing the abstract in Florida at the American Academy of Allergy, Asthma, Immunology meetings. There were 9 patients being reported with a reflux, and it appears to be like everybody knows at least one person in their high school class who can blow smoke through their nose, from their, out their nose and out their eye. And for many of the quote-unquote, it's pretty wild.
Yeah, wow.
But there's always it's known and seen. And it's commonly seen in those, I should say more commonly known about in the scuba divers, because when they do the Valsalva, they may blow the valve that they usually do the Valsalva maneuver and try to cause equilibration in the tympanic through the interstitial tube to their ears. They actually may blow the valve in their nasolacrimal drainage system. But the reflux itself is it's very small. And I do not see medication leaching up the 1.5 centimeters of the duct when it's kind of almost collapsed. So, I mean, I just find that very not plausible as a major contributor. So the idea is nasal lacrimal reflux itself is low. Nasal ocular reflex is probably high. And then the question is actually vice versa. When you decrease the inflammation in the nasal cavity by a nasal steroid, for example, congestion decreases in general as it seeps into local tissue, and you'll get improved drainage through the nasal lacrimal from the tears, so you don't get as much tearing because it's draining and you get more of a runny nose. So I do believe that does play a role. No one has come down with a specific percentage. However, there are studies undergoing right now by Niclario's group and Fawad Baroudi who are looking into the nasal ocular reflex and actually have published one study with azolastine and have another study that they've just completed using an intranasal steroid, and it's under review.
Well, clearly the The use of, I mean, part of the reason to have this reflex is so that you make a lot of tears and wash all the junk out of your eyes. That suggests that there should be a pretty big role for like ophthalmic irrigation, like washing it with saline or something like that. Do you recommend that for patients during allergy season?
I clearly always use lubricants in the eye for during the allergy season, only because they can use it almost as at will. It's not, like I said, the chances of getting a conjunctivitis medicamentosa from topical lubricants is extremely low, except if a person was using every 5 minutes or an incredible rate of use. The reason that occurs is probably in regards to the preservatives more so. So then when you use preservative-free, you really get even less of a chance. That's why conjunctivitis medicamentosa usually occurs with multi-dose type of medications that are used incredibly frequently. Instead of using BID, they're used Q2 hours or Q1 hour. And they're overused. You will then develop conjunctivitis medicamentosa, and especially when if those agents contain a vasoconstrictor as well. The overall use of lubricants is quite high. I mean, I do use them, but I have to warn you, or warn anybody who uses these, that you should just be considerate if they're going to use it every hour, every half hour, that you should use preservative-free. If they're going to use it every 4 to 6, they can use a multi-dose vial, because that's a lubricant in that case is not going to cause any dramatic increase in the irritative effect. Though I'm doing a review, I'm reviewing the literature now on allergy to ocular lubricants, or I should say to preservatives specifically, to trying to figure out this, because many of us, we get referrals from ophthalmologists allergic to, quote-unquote, a topical beta blocker. And it's not the beta blocker, it's actually it may be the frequent use of the lubricant.
Do you put a limit on the number of days that patients should be using the vasoconstrictor eye drop?
Vasoconstrictor eye drops can be used. They just like the nose, they should just not be, they can be used but not abused. If you have to use a topical vasoconstrictor, which some people do, every hour, you're going to get conjunctivitis medicamentosa. You're going to get a rebound effect.
Okay.
And it's very clear. And it's after about 3 to 5 days that you'll start increasing the propensity to rebound. The rebound becomes more and more pronounced as we go beyond a week. And that's been shown more in animal models. No one's done a human model of that, but in clinical practice, many people see that.
What about the study with the nasal vasoconstrictor, where not all people ever develop rhinitis medicamentosa? Any similar work done with the conjunctiva?
In the conjunctiva, there was a paper by Michael Raisman and Sheldon Spector, preliminary, because there are many, I shouldn't say many, most ophthalmologists believe that there is such a thing called conjunctivitis medicamentosa. There is one leading ophthalmologist who does not believe in that. He doesn't believe in it. Actually, he writes against it. But everybody, even his trainees, speak against him, saying it does exist. And it just makes sense that it does, and everybody does see it. People see those individuals with red eyes, and they're just working in an irritant environment and been using chronic vasoconstrictors, and it just becomes worse.
I mean, I guess we had thought that it occurs in almost everyone with overuse of nose drops, and then the study showed that indeed it didn't occur in everyone. Do you think this probably the same thing applies with the conjunctiva? There are individuals where it doesn't ever occur?
Oh, I see what you're asking. Yeah, I believe that there are some people who have just an incredible ability to vasoconstrict and not go into rebound, while others who have like a vasomotor conjunctivitis, on the other hand, will rebound more so than others. So yeah, it's a full spectrum. There are some that are just resistant.
Yeah. Wouldn't it also depend on which decongestant is used? I know that Visine supposedly gets the red out, but what is the active ingredient? Is that phenylephrine, and with something longer acting like oxymetazoline, which is what we use in the nose, which is less likely to cause rebound congestion, would that be more effective for conjunctivitis?
That's a great question. No one's ever done studies of which ones. The original studies were like the phenylephrines, the alpha-adrenergic first-generation agents. The antazolines and the secondary generation type of agents also had a propensity, but I'm not sure if they were equal to the ones that were done in the rabbit studies. I've never seen the literature. I've always reflected that ocular allergy is a bastard child. We don't have as much data as we do for the nose and the lung. Clearly, it is a wide-open arena and for research, and even, again, the private practitioner can do a lot of work here from participating in evaluating ophthalmic agents as well as contact lenses, as well as these topical eye drops. I mean, these are just easy studies to do. Well, easy. They're not as hard as studies that are done.
The use of topical cyclosporine eye drops, I presume that you use them quite freely with vernal conjunctivitis, but what about unresponsive allergic conjunctivitis? Any role at all?
If I train my own fellows, and I put the primary on, I would love to train every allergist. I believe every allergist should be able to use topical cyclosporin, because what I try to reflect to them is that ocular allergies does not preclude the development of tear film dysfunction. And in fact, when you treat ocular allergy with your oral antihistamines, even with the second, third, or whatever generation we will see in the future years, they will always have anti-muscarinic binding effects and will cause a decrease in the aqueous, and with chronic use lead to a mild inflammation from just a poor tear film. Restasis topical cyclosporin is a quote-unquote an agent that can be used with relative impunity. It is a great agent to be used, and I use a lot of it, probably more than some topical antihistamines, only because of the skewed population that I see. But clearly, we as allergists can really move ahead and enter a field of what we call immuno-ophthalmology, because most ophthalmologists don't like systemic treatments. They hate it, and we can't. And 1 out of 10 allergists, I would say, on the average, would feel comfortable in using immunomodulatory agents. Topical Restasis is an agent that should be on every allergist's shelf. It is, and when used with certain ways, the recommended way at this point in time is 1 drop in each eye twice a day. I've used the medication as much as 4 drops in each eye twice a day, as what I call a high-dose burst, and I taper, and I get over a 70% response rate from failures seen by other ophthalmologists and other allergists. So it is a concomitant disease, and it's usually seen more so in those individuals who are age 40 or more.
Would you tend to use it in extremely difficult cases in the patient that years ago you might have started with a steroid eye drop?
Correct. Steroid eye drops, I also think most allergists we have to teach them how to become more comfortable with. But just like we do, what we used to do, or whatever we all used to do, in a severe asthmatic, we would do a steroid burst. We wouldn't give steroids for a month or 2 months or 3 months if we didn't need to. We would put a steroid burst and taper them off quickly and hopefully be under control. And then we had inhaled steroids to add, so we can get away with the oral steroids for the lungs, for example. The same thing with the eye. If you have a real severe ocular inflammatory conjunctivitis, Restasis actually is not very good for routine inflammatory response of the eye. What it does is downregulate the T cells and the cytokine flush that you get. So it is a specific immunophilin for more T cell mediated responses, not mast cell mediated responses. And there actually has been one study showing Restasis does not work for allergic conjunctivitis. I was hoping that it does because in vitro, cyclosporin does have an effect on mast cells. Now, the question I always ask is that, was that study done on mucosal mast cells or connective tissue mast cells? Because the eye is predominantly, conjunctiva is predominantly connective tissue mast cells.
There were, over the years, we've seen various reports, not very many of them, supporting the idea of local IgE synthesis in the eye. Has that been substantiated or refuted in any way?
Did you say local IT immunotherapy?
No, local IgE production.
I'm sorry, I was blocked.
Like negative skin test, but positive IgE being produced in the eye, locally only.
Local production, excellent question. Actually, Ute Botker, people don't appreciate. There is a paper that he has done showing those who had a positive conjunctival test and negative skin test. It was interesting to say those who had a late phase response on the conjunctival provocation, a late phase being like the skin late phase or pulmonary late phase and asthma, meaning in several hours after the allergen placement in conjunctival provocation, what happened is that they have a late phase. 100% of them developed skin test positive reactivity. And this was in a specific study of birch. So it was a single allergen in the European study. In addition, there are clear studies in the U.S. That have shown, for example, localized production of only in the eye. An example would be chymopapane, which was used as a meat tenderizer. People remember it. But it was used actually in that pill that people cleaned their contact lenses with. It actually digests the protein off those constant wear, the daily wear, CDW condoms, the ones that they bought and they wore them for 3 months to 6 months. They would add a pill every day or every other day to clean the lens with its protein, and people will get localized protein production. In addition, Mark Ballow, when he was at University of Connecticut with Peter Donchik, an ophthalmologist there, showed that, quote-unquote, individuals who had seasonal allergic rhinitis versus perennial, those who had seasonal, quote, symptoms would not have as high a serum for IgE to a specific allergen, and, quote-unquote, the presence in the tear film would be plus or minus. People who had perennial, on the other hand, like the dust mites, you would find that it would be almost equal in those patients. So you can have local productions and differences. In fact, about 5 to 10% of people with allergic, what we call allergies, I'll say about 5% may only have ocular allergies and no nasal symptoms, meaning you can have a subset of that. But most people have allergic rhinoconjunctivitis, about 90%. And the other question is, can people have nasal symptoms and not ocular symptoms? Again, I would assume it would be a Gaussian distribution, and probably about 5% of those as well.
Okay,
I guess that leads to a question. If you have a patient with rhinitis who has minimum or, let's say, no complaints of the eye, and you want to do a challenge with dust mite or a pollen, would it be of any value to do only a conjunctival challenge? Because obviously it's much easier to do than a nasal challenge if the eye is not the predominant symptom organ.
Your design of the study and what your proposal was actually what was done initially in the late 20s and early 30s. Noon and Freeman, when we have the skin test, when the skin test was being developed, so to speak, it was before it was skin test, it was a conjunctival provocation. Peshkin, and Dr. Belanti may be able to give me a little bit more history on this. The scenario that Peshkin also did a tremendous volume. I've actually pulled the articles. It's fascinating to read, where they did conjunctival provocations. And the interesting thing that they found, what did they use for a quote-unquote control for conjunctival provocation. Anybody want to take a guess? Which pollen was used as a control?
Ragweed?
No, that would be a positive control. What was used as a negative control?
Oh, pine pollen?
Pine pollen, that's exactly right. Pine pollen was used as a negative control. We know it as a high pollen producer, but one of the least allergenic. In fact, it's essentially non-allergenic and was used by Michael Peshkin and the original group as, quote-unquote, their negative controls, just to have some pollen put in the eye to see what would happen. And I do use conjunctival provocation tests when people do complain. They swear to me they have cat allergen, there are no nasal symptoms, and I will say rarely I get a positive conjunctival provocation that confirms it, meaning rarely. I'd say 1 out of 4 to 5, 20 to 30% will have a positive conjunctival provocation, negative skin test, negative RAS, but positive ocular symptom.
But they have those people that are positive have complained of ocular symptoms that you've done?
That is correct.
Okay.
And the technique for doing the technique is not hard. It's something that people can be made comfortable with.
Well, but obviously, unlike
in Italy.
Yeah, unlike a skin test, you can't do like 20 different allergens, though. You only have 2 eyes.
Ergo, that's why they developed the skin test, because people only have 2 eyes, and if you really give them a bad reaction, they don't come back for a repeat skin test or repeat eye test.
Would you get a reflexive positive challenge in both eyes by applying in one eye?
Yes, you can get increased tearing and also by a reflex, not by allergenicity, and that's not uncommon.
So you can do one allergen at a time.
I do one allergen in one eye. I never do. I always use the other eyes as a blank, as a control.
Oh, don't use the word blind when you're talking about eyes. That's just gauche.
That's why we don't use double-blind studies when we do ocular studies.
I'll keep an eye out for you then.
Hey, Lynn, this has really been a great discussion. I think we all want to thank you for going into this topic in detail. I think this was just fantastic. And as a very first presenter for our Conferences Online special Wednesday edition, I'd like to commend you for that, and we need to develop some kind of a plaque or award for you for doing that.
Yeah, right. We're going to do a fireside chat. No, I think this idea is really good, and if we have our conversation like this across the country, I mean, people as they join us, I think they'll see the value of this. It's like ask the expert, or even it is an expert. Everybody on this conference call, so to speak, on this COLA series, as their participant, may bring something out that I don't know about, and we can all learn from each other.
Yeah, thank you very much. It was great.
This has been an ACAAI production. To learn more about Conferences Online Allergy or the American College of Allergy, Asthma, and Immunology, go to www.acaai.org. See you next time.